And we're here today with Alison Worthington, the mayoral candidate for the Greens. Alison, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Daryl.
So can you tell us a little bit about yourself? What's your history and what are your ties to the Eurobodalla?
Sure. Well, I was born on Daryl country in the Blue Mountains in New South Wales almost 47 years ago, and raised in a Catholic family, in Catholic schooling, a big family. So I feel that that's brought me a sense of tolerance and patience in terms of living with just a few people. And I found myself in Maroubra 7 years ago. In the meantime, I'd lived in Northern Rivers, New South Wales. I'd lived in the south of Tasmania on beautiful Bruny Island. And I'd even spent a reasonable amount of time in Lombok, Indonesia. But Maroubra absolutely drew me in. And I really put down roots here in 2014 and thrilled to be here.
Great. And you own a local business, I believe, from reading your profile, and you do your manufacturing here in the local shire, is that right?
Absolutely. It is a small operation. It's a small business selling reusable cloth menstrual pads, also used for incontinence. And, yeah, proudly still produced here in Maroubra. The business has been around since the 1990s and was started by a woman in Victoria and has sold from woman to woman until it came to me about 5 years ago. And, yeah, we're one of the few that are still manufactured in Australia doing reusable cloth pads, which is quite a market, let me say.
That's fantastic. It's great to hear of, production being local to Maroubra. So, there's a lot of demands, no doubt, on your time. How do you think that you'll be able to prioritize coming into council, and how much time would you be able to devote to the position if you're elected?
Thanks, Daryl. That is a good question because we've all got to live, and I'm happy to say that I'm coming to council in an era where it's not just populated with property developers who are sitting back on the wealth of their property development and therefore can afford to treat council as a full-time role. I do work part-time in retail in Maroubra, and I'll be reducing my hours there. I've had to hone the way that I run my small business to really get smart about how much time I can put into that. And I will be giving up a little bit of time for other community projects that I've been involved in. Sorry, Sage Education and Events Committee. But I really want to give a lot to being in council. I'm doing this because I really want to play an active role in the betterment of this community. I want to live here. I want everyone that lives here to enjoy the full benefit that they can from being in this beautiful corner of the world. So I'm ready to put a hell of a lot of my time and effort into it.
That's excellent. And what motivated you to be the mayoral candidate?
Climate. It's just not good enough for us to sit back and wait for others to do the work on this anymore. Eurobodalla Shire had the chance to declare a climate emergency in 2019 when Greens councillor Pat McGinley brought that motion for a climate emergency declaration to council, and I'm still devastated to have to tell people that it was voted down. And since then, of course, we've suffered the 2019-2020 Black Summer bushfires and the effects of climate change in our lives on a daily basis. We certainly can't wait for federal level policies to act on this. Clearly that's not happening in a hurry because they're beholden at the federal level to fossil fuel industries. There's so much that can be done locally for meaningful action on climate, and also building resilience in our community to the effects of climate change that are already upon us. So hands down, it was time for me to step into a different way of activism, of doing my activism on climate, and with a council that wasn't acting, I saw the need to step in.
We've heard from listeners on this show concerns about environmental impact, especially, as you mentioned, post-bushfires, watching the development in Churros, in Dalmany, in Browley, and listeners have voiced concerns about feeling that they've been dismissed by councillors. How do you feel that the process with council can be better and more accountable and transparent to voters?
We do hear a lot of that from the community, and there's a lot of room for improvement. unfortunately, in some ways, our most recent council has thwarted community involvement in decision-making about development. There are processes for community consultation that are undertaken, and at the end of the process, residents just feel that they've been a part of a ticker box process and that they haven't actually really been heard. Clearly, when every time these developments come up, such as in Dalmeny and Coiler Lake and the land clearing recently at Browley, Turnbull's Lane most recently in Maruya, when we see that every time these developments come up, the community have to mobilise, launch a campaign, use a lot of volunteer resources and time again and again to try to get their voice heard at council, then council must have missed a point somewhere in where the community sentiment really did lie about how we do development in this shire. So I think that there's room for us to have a really big look all over again as a community with council at how we do appropriate development in this shire.
Well, that actually leads into my next question, which is about the housing crisis that we're currently experiencing in the Urbadala, especially, post destruction of people's homes and the bushfires. A lot of people are feeling the crunch, and a lot of them are locals that have been here for a long time looking for housing, and there's a lack of rentals, lack of affordable options. What role do you think council can play in addressing this situation, and what kind of development is responsible?
Yeah, Daryl, well, the housing crisis has actually been unfurling for a lot longer than since bushfires, and it's absolutely down to a neglect from all levels of government in investing in, public housing, but housing to cover people throughout the whole continuum of housing needs. There is absolutely a role for local government here, especially as landowners in this area. We've recently seen the sale of operational lands that will be used for housing, that work owned by council, sold into the hands of private developers. Private development happens, that's fantastic, I'm all for it. I like to see sustainable development appropriate in the context of where it's being built. But it's clear that private property development does not meet our housing needs. It hasn't for a very long time. So there's a role for council to step in there and act to plan housing for our communities so that everybody does have access to that basic right of secure housing. I've talked over recent months of a number of ways that council can be a part of that. We don't have to look far to see good examples of how councils can. In the Shoalhaven Council, they're actively involved in partnerships with community housing providers to provide both public and social and affordable housing. When I say affordable housing, I just want to clarify that that can actually include housing for double income families. We're not talking only about housing for people of low income. The housing crisis is such now that there are essential workers on good incomes that cannot afford housing, cannot find housing. The Bega Valley Shire Council have just released to public exhibition their draft affordable housing strategy. Urbadala Shire Council doesn't have that strategy.
So that's really interesting. It's great to hear what you've said about that. What would you say are your main priorities? You've mentioned the climate emergency, which is something I've spoken with the other mayoral candidates about. And obviously housing seems to be a great priority. What are your other priorities if you're elected to council?
Sure. Well, we are coming into the local government elections on the stance of promising accountability from council. That is transparent processes, genuine community consultation, and generally better interaction between council and the community. Also, livability. So that's about safe, inclusive, well-connected communities. Building that resilience that I talked about to the challenges of the changing climate. And yeah, it's about jobs. It's always about jobs. You need to be able to be employed to be able to live somewhere. And I think we've got an opportunity to embrace a lot of employment opportunities in the new renewables economy.
That's great. Actually, I have more questions to ask you about that, but they will be saved until next week, listeners, and we will be following up with each of our mayoral candidates to ask further questions about our business community. But on this show, as many of our long-term listeners know, we've recently had speakers communicating their concerns around the hospital and the bypass. I know that these are state projects, but what do you feel that our local council can do to help influence the best outcome of these projects?
Yes, these are state-level projects, Daryl, but there's absolutely room for council to advocate to the state government agencies on behalf of the community, explaining these are the expectations that our community have from these projects, how are you going to meet them? Late in the process with the bypass, the idea of council proposing to Transport for New South Wales and Roads New South Wales a co-design committee to involve the community better in the process was introduced, so that came in quite late in the process. But I feel that as a community, with our council, we should be able to stand up to the state government and say, before you begin all of your consultation processes, let's field a co-design committee. Mm-hmm. These are not projects that should be announced upon and dumped upon a community. And as we've seen with the bypass, a lot of members of our community have a lot of issues with the process. They wonder how, from 8 options for the Mayoral bypass, the state government came back to us with the preferred route, and we have no explanation of how the conversation went between 8 and the preferred route. I know you've discussed on your program, and your readers will be familiar with a lot of the issues around that. And it's the same with the hospital. In this area, we need a level 4 hospital upon opening, and it took council a little bit too long to get around to advocating on behalf of our community to the state government for that. We have great activism in the community thanks to Dr. Michael Holland and the One New Hospital Urbadala campaign. They shouldn't be left alone on this. Council should be supporting them all the way.
Absolutely. Alison, is there anything else that you would like our listeners to know about you and your campaign?
Sure. I'm running with the Greens, and it's a no-brainer that we're here for the environment. So I didn't get to mention environmental responsibility as one of the tenets that we stand on for council. It's our core business. I encourage people to look at the Greens New South Wales site if you're unsure what the Greens do and don't stand for. There's a little bit of myth-busting that could be done there about the Greens. But I'm a woman that is here in my community, wanting the best for my community in a safe climate. I care for social justice. I want to make sure that the voices that are not in the room still get to be heard. And there are a lot of people of disadvantage whose voices never get into the room.
Thank you. Thanks, Alison. That's Alison Worthington of the Greens, the lead candidate and mayoral candidate. Alison, we'll end this segment with a song. Have you chosen one for us? And can you tell us why you picked this one in particular?
Oh, it's pretty easy, Daryl. This one came into my ears for the first time on ABC Southeast Radio last week. It's the Bamboos with a song called Power Without Greed. And if there's anything for us to see following the COP26 meetings in Glasgow in recent weeks, those who are in power with greed are running in the old style, move over. We're ready for power without greed.
Thanks very much, Alison. Lovely to speak with you. We'll hear more from Alison Worthington next week, November 19th. Make sure that you're tuned in. Welcome back, Alison. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Daryl.
So can you speak about your thoughts on the current situation in the Shire with council? Where do you think that our current council has done a good job, and where do you think that there's some room for improvement?
Sure. Great question, Daryl. And, this is the level of government closest to us. And we love to bash government, so it's easy to look close to home and find all the things that are going wrong. I've got some issues, but, our council does do a pretty good job of local government. We have amazing things to celebrate, like our libraries, art services and the new BAS in Mayoral. We have pools to swim in. A lot of the assets of our community lie in the natural surrounds, which council has absolutely done a great job to promote and capitalise on for our tourism. I wonder, though, if we've probably focused a little bit too much on putting energy into developing the tourism of the Shire, and we could have put a bit more towards just getting things right here at a community level, things like the affordable housing strategy, things like connected pathways and walkways that are accessible for anyone in the community to use to help us get out of the car and back on the footpath. So, yeah, plenty to criticise if you want to look closely. Certainly the issues around transparency and accountability need to be dealt with urgently. I know that I'm not alone as a candidate in bringing that agenda to the new council. And let's just say it's going to be exciting because there's a lot of room for improvement. And we can really have a good look at how do the community want to be engaged in council decision making. It might turn out that, you know, a lot of the community doesn't need to be engaged or don't want to be, but we won't know until we ask. And we might be able to find new ways for the community to be more involved in council decision making processes. It could be things like taking the ordinary council meetings to different locations throughout the Shire to give people in those far-flung reaches to the south and north the opportunity to attend in person and see how the processes get underway in council.
Great, thanks. And so you're running for mayor, and can you tell me what you think the role of the mayor is in council and how the role of mayor is different from other councillors?
Sure. Well, I see the role of mayor as a leadership role, and I just want to check that people hear when I'm saying leadership that I mean true leadership of human communities, not the picture that we've been led to believe is leadership, such as what we see in elected representatives, for example, in federal politics. It's taking responsibility for leading a group of people, but really just to source the best of the thinking and the best ideas and the best initiatives from that group of people. Not my way, but our way.
Yeah, excellent. Our listeners have provided feedback in the past that councillors haven't been present when they address a meeting, and that perhaps council hasn't recognised how much the landscape has changed in the Shire over the last decade or two. Do you think that there's enough diversity on council, and how do you think that council could foster further diversity?
Well, there's a lot in that question, Daryl, and I do just want to start with diversity on council. No. We can't blame council for that, but I've seen around the country, especially over the last 2 years, as different jurisdictions come up for local government elections, targeted campaigns towards women and people from minority communities. Would you like to be in local government? Here's how. How can we help you? Because we know we need to have more diverse representation at all levels of government. I've never seen 50% women in the history books of Hiebert Shire, so we've got a long way to go. Diversity, yeah, plenty of work to do there.
Excellent. And tell me more about the Greens team and the people that you are running with. Who are they? How do you find each other, and why do you work well together?
Well, let me say we found each other. Our common ground, obviously, is the Greens network. So we're all a member of New South Wales Greens and the wider Australian Greens community. So that's a bit of a giveaway to what we stand for. If you're in the Greens, you're there for social justice, economic justice, environmental responsibility, peace and disarmament, and grassroots democracy. It's a wonderful organisation to be a part of, and the first that I've ever truly been a part of that practices grassroots democracy. I know that I sit in my local meetings, and decisions that we make there through safe meeting practice in heartfelt discussion can be filtered and sent all the way up through Greens channels to where decisions are made by Australian Greens at the federal level. So we have that in common. And I am the lead candidate, and I'm coming from Mayoral. Our number 2 candidate is Nadine Hills, and she's a mother and psychologist living in Akalele, right down at the southern end of the Shire. She brings a passion for action on climate and also action and support for health services, particularly mental health services, and just a passion for everything. When you meet Nadine, you'll know what I mean. Kylie Ryder is our number 3 candidate. We're really pleased to be bringing 3 female candidates to these council elections. Kylie's a Mayoral South Head local with a background in accounting, and she serves here in the community as fire and rescue crew. You can also find Kylie in a surf boat, rowing in Jaws Bass events whenever they might be able to happen again. Look forward to seeing Kylie out in the boat again, competing whenever we can get that up and running again. And finally, we have Charlie Bell. Charlie hails from Tomakan, and Charlie just brings such a depth of experience in local campaigning from when he's lived in Canberra. He's served with the Democrats before, been a part of a lot of campaigns for government, and we're really lucky to have him.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. And, you're running as part of the Greens, as you mentioned. There's sometimes a little bit of skepticism about major political parties in local elections. And can you tell us, what do you think about that, and what benefit do you see the backing of a major party can have for our local community?
Sure, we do hear a lot of skepticism about, and people are very cynical about having major parties in local government. But we all have political opinions and political persuasions, and the political is personal. But if people feel that you can't walk and chew gum at the same time by being a membership of a group or a party that have distinct principles and agendas and still serve your community, then, I don't know, I think there's a bit of a lack of imagination there. Most of us do. Exist in groups and have membership in groups with a certain agenda, but still manage to sit in other service roles in our community. The two are not mutually exclusive. I think what, for myself, coming from the Greens, a huge benefit that can bring to the Shire. And let's not forget that we've had Greens on council since 2004 here in the Eurobodalla. Pat McGinley most recently, Gabby Harding before him, Chris Cowell before that time. We're part of a broader network of people that are interested in working at the grassroots level for their communities. So we are in touch with a really supportive mentoring network of existing Greens councillors and mayors throughout New South Wales and former Greens councillors and mayors throughout New South Wales who continue to volunteer their time and experience to us. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel on everything. We can ask around, has any other council done this? How did they do it? What was the outcome? There's a wealth of experience there that I'm really happy to have access to.
Oh, excellent. Great, thanks. We've had a really difficult 2 years here in the Eurobodalla. We've had bushfires, floods, COVID restrictions, and all of these have really impacted our business community. Going forward, we have a bypass, which in other communities has slowed commerce. They've shown for up to five years. So what do you have to say to the business community, and how do you feel that council can help our business community as they recover from the last 2 years and going forward into times of increasing change?
Well, council, certainly has a role there and have played a pretty big role in facilitating the delivery of support services to business in the community post bushfires and COVID. So I know that they have actually been a great funnel through which that support has been able to come into the Shire. Sure, I'm sure there's always more to do. I think that we really need to be taking the front foot in terms of going to the state government about these major projects and saying, sure, so you're about to put a town like Maruya into a time of transition. How are you going to help us through that? I think in these situations, the bypass towns know that they need to become a destination in their own right. And I think Maruya's been a little bit left off the map in this Shire. Literally, up until recently, if you pulled out any of the local maps for the area, sort of as far as a tourism guide, Maruya didn't even have a street map. So, Maruya could take some initiative there with the support of council. Here's an idea. Why don't we have the kind of public toilets and facilities that people drive an extra half an hour to go to because they've got a reputation around the state as, have you seen the toilets in Maruya? I mean, that's a thing.
Yeah, well, we've certainly heard of a lot of frustration about the toilets in Mogo and the lack of building toilets that the community felt were accessible and would meet their needs, especially with the upcoming development of a mountain bike facility in Mogo. And so while it sounds like more of a potentially a minor change in our communities, it's actually something that has resonated on this show quite deeply previously. So yeah, that's excellent.
It's a basic human need. If we can't address the basic human needs, we're getting something terribly wrong.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. Is there anything else that you'd like to convey about your message and to tell voters as we go into this election on December 4th?
Sure. Well, look, this is the first time I've been part of a local government campaign in the Eurobodalla, but I definitely sense that the community is ready for a change. And there are some great candidates putting themselves forward to offer that and to be a part of that change. I think that if people are careful with their vote, they can make sure that we get a majority of clear thinking, I'd have to say progressive councillors into the next Eurobodalla Shire Council to start bringing about that change and bringing it about along with the community. So, you know, there's more than one candidate talking about bringing to the Shire better and more genuine community engagement. So look out for the people that sort of have some sound policies and ideas around engaging the community better in council processes.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for speaking with us. The next song that you have picked is, I believe, Emma Donovan, My Goodness.
Please play Emma Donovan, My Goodness.
It's a feel-good song, isn't it?
I love it.
Lovely. Well, thank you so much, Alison, and good luck in your campaign.
Thank you.